solution in the Middle East. Last night, the Israeli ambassador said Benjamin Netanyahu's government would not support an independent Palestinian state. The Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, says that remains the right outcome to the conflict. UN Special Rapporteur for the occupied Palestinian territories, Dr. Francesca Albanese, has given her reaction to LBC.
It's shocking, but not surprising. It's not surprising because this is not the first time that Israeli senior political officials stated, and not later than, I think, 1 week ago, Netanyahu said the same.
Officials in Germany say 4 suspected members of Hamas have been detained over planned attacks on Jewish institutions in Europe. It's understood 3 suspects have been arrested in Berlin, with another in the Netherlands. The Bank of England Governor Andrew Bailey says it is too early to speculate about cutting interest rates. The bank has kept the base rate on hold at 5.25%. Consumer finance expert Sarah Pennells says if you are a saver, though, there are great deals to be had out there.
You can actually get close to the base rate. You can get over 5% on an easy access account, so where you don't have to give the bank any warning that you want to take the money out. Unlike previously, where you really had to lock your money away for sort of 3, 4, 5 years.
In the city, the FTSE 100 has closed up 100 points at 76.48. The pound buys $1.27 and €1.16. LBC weather: scattered showers continuing in the northwest tonight, largely dry elsewhere, and a low of 1 degree. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Daryl Jackson.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Iain Dale.
Hello, a very good evening. It's 3 minutes past 8 on LBC. If you just joined us, welcome to the programme. We have Dave Ward with us, General Secretary of the Communication Workers Union. We often have trade union leaders on this programme to talk about the current state of trade unions, the Labour Party, the government, whatever. I think we're about the only programme on British radio that ever does that, which I think is an absolute disgrace. But Dave, welcome again. It's been a long time. We've betrayed you and gone with other union leaders over this year a little bit, because I think it's important that we hear from different voices.
Yeah, no worries.
Now, you haven't had the easiest of years, have you, with the dispute with the Royal Mail? Now, just give our listeners the background to all of that, how the dispute started, how it came to an end. We've already got a full switchboard of calls. Lots of people want to talk to you, but we'll do that after 8:15.
Yeah, so I think the first thing to say is that it's been the most difficult period in the history, I think, of Royal Mail for postal workers. I think it's not about, us in that sense. It's not about the company. I think the starting point needs to be what you said. I think it was on Jeremy Vine around about 18 months ago, when you said, you got it right, you said the toxic mixture of privatisation and mismanagement of the company had done a lot of damage to Royal Mail. And I think that the truth is, like that, you did say that. Yeah.
I don't think I said toxic privatisation.
But
anyway.
No, I'm sure you did, Ian. I'm sure you did. We can check that out while we're on air. But the truth is that it did do a lot of damage. And, if you remember rightly, at the time, the company had a CEO called Simon Thompson. He left. What I can tell your listeners today is that basically the top team of Royal Mail, the 4 top positions that run the company at that point, all of them have now gone, the last 2 announcing their departures this week. So I think we were proved right about the way the company was being run. We reached an agreement on the dispute. It's not particularly popular agreement, but it was the right agreement to make at that time, because I think had we been as reckless as what the company were, Royal Mail would not exist today. And, they took the company to the brink of bankruptcy. There's clearly some very difficult challenges for Royal Mail. You're seeing that at the moment with quality of service. One of the things that I do want to get across tonight is that this is not the fault of frontline postal workers. They're doing a fantastic job in very difficult circumstances, but their world has been turned upside down. And that's before we get to some of the bigger changes that need to be made to start to grow the parcels market and deliver at different times in the evening, things like that. And what's happened is that they've cut jobs, too many jobs. They imposed all of that change on the company, on our members, during the dispute. And they've basically seen thousands of people have left the company. When they tried to recruit new people, they imposed new terms and conditions on new workers. We didn't agree then. What we agreed was that we would look at alternative approaches. We couldn't sustain the dispute on that issue alone. We had to have a longer term strategy to deal with that because they'd already imposed it. And what's happening is that they're not staying. They're coming in to replace workers that leave, and they're going within, in some cases, a matter of days. And I think that until we get quality of service right and fix quality of service, until we get a joint approach with the company to improve morale, and until they sort out the resourcing problem, equalise the terms and conditions and start recruiting people again who are going to stay, we're not going to get out of the current predicament. What I will say, one final thing though, I do believe the new CEO, who's been in about 3.5 months, I think he gets it. I think he knows that the only way forward is to work together, is to try and engage the workforce again so that they're on board for the change. And I think if we do that, and we're up for that, that's all we ever wanted, then we can still ensure that Royal Mail has a bright future. But it is tough times at the moment.
Let me ask you a direct question. You clearly agreed to a deal which you didn't really like. Now, I interpreted that as you agreeing to it because you knew that if you didn't, Royal Mail could cease to exist. Is that...
I think that's an honest assessment.
Look,
the deal that we got was always going to be a tough deal. I think the union, on reflection, we said at the time we had two different ballots going on, one for a no-strings pay deal and two to deal with a change because the company had ripped up all of the other agreements. And I think I'm here to say tonight that we made the right decision, because had we not made that decision, I think Royal Mail were ready to carry on that dispute. They never wanted a deal with the union. There was some tough issues that are in there that have got to be dealt with, but I've not changed my view. And, I do want to say as well, the deal was pretty much unanimous on our executive, other than one person, I think, not on the main deal, on a separate part of it to do with the fleet engineers. And it went through the membership in a very significant turnout, around about 70% on a 75%, 25% turnout, 75 in favour. So what we're saying is that, yes, we had to take that decision. There's no getting away from that. Had the dispute continued, Royal Mail would not exist today. Now, faced with that decision, as a leader of the union, with other leaders of the union, we believe we made the right decision, even though there were some unpalatable parts of that agreement. On all of the unpalatable parts, the agreement does give us the opportunity to reverse those, and we will in time. But we did it in the interest of members' jobs overall, and we did it in the interest because we care about the company. And it was the right call to make at that time.
Right, I'm going to read you out 3 texts and emails that we've had over the past hour. And these are a representative sample. They're not going to make pleasant listening for you. Warn you now. Robin in Hatfield says, I'm a postal worker of 22 years in Hatfield, and I'd like to ask Dave Ward a question. After you convinced us to go on strike for 18 days last year, only to cave in and work with the Royal Mail to impose harmful changes to our terms and conditions, how can you still claim to represent us? Since the agreement, the CWU and you have been nowhere to be seen as we've faced relentless pressure, morale has plummeted, and the mental health of thousands of us have been shattered. When was the last time you even set foot in a delivery office? When will you, Dave Ward, resign to allow us to elect a new leader who truly represents our interests? Here's a text from Aussie Pete, 20 years at the Royal Mail and CWU. Dave Ward sold the workers of the Royal Mail down the river. This agreement that Dave Ward gave us has the worst conditions and pay that we've ever had. CWHQ has lost the confidence of the members. We will never follow Dave Ward into a dispute again. Finally, Can you let Dave know that part of the reason I left Royal Mail less than a year ago was due to the ineptitude of not only Royal Mail, but also the CWU in negotiating a settlement? The CWU caved in to every major demand that Royal Mail put to it, from later starts and finish times, which affect young families and carers, a two-tier workforce with those starting since the agreement on worse terms than existing staff, to not resolving the increasing workload and the continuing prioritisation of tracked parcels over all other workload, including but not limited to hospital appointments. The union were complicit in recommending that members agree to the agreement made by ensuring that there was payment made to staff to bribe them to take a short-term payoff in lieu of future impositions by Royal Mail, notwithstanding the above working times and terms and conditions for new starts and continuing and failing of the USO. I love the job, but I'm happier now knowing that I'm out of the continuing battle between an intransigent Royal Mail and union, which is wholly out of touch with many of its members who gave up many days of unpaid strike days for an awful agreement.
Well, obviously I don't agree with what everybody said there. And if I can explain, the agreement that we got mitigated all of Royal Mail's proposals, so we didn't accept all of their proposals at all. Perhaps one of the key ones that is difficult for people, which hasn't yet been introduced, is the debate about later start times. And here's the problem that we faced. I mean, Royal Mail wanted and went out to our members and made it absolutely clear that they wanted 3 hours. They wanted postal workers' start times to go back by 3 hours. The agreement we ended up with puts it back by 60 minutes. There is a clause in it that says if that doesn't work, then it can go back. It may have to go back up to 90 minutes.
So what's a normal start time now?
Well, they do range a little bit, but let's say around about 6 o'clock, something like that. There will be different variants on that. But broadly, what was going on, and there is no way out at this point. You know, people need to recognise this. And I think the fact that 75% of our members did vote for the deal, and I'm not saying they was singing and dancing in that way. I think they understood the realities of the situation.
Well, just to balance those three texts up, let me read out one that does understand. Chris says, if it wasn't for Dave Ward, there would be no Royal Mail. Simon Thompson and his cronies almost destroyed the company. There are bits of the deal I don't like, but if it wasn't for Dave, I would be on the dole.
Well, can I say to you, it's not about me. The union is about the members.
But it
the
is.
Union
I mean,
is,
a lot of these people are criticising you directly.
I'm not responding to, either of those comments and saying that it's about me. That's what I'm trying to suggest here. So let me come back to the elements of the agreement. So on that, we got that back. Now, the reason why it had to change and why there was no way out of that is because Royal Mail, pursuing a green agenda, which we would support, made a decision that they were going to take Mail off of flights across the UK. We can't stop them making that decision.
Why would they do that?
Well, because of obviously the reality of how damaging that can be. And in the market that they're in, a lot of their competitors are pursuing the green agenda. So it's about growing the business. And a lot of companies and a lot of members of the public will choose now what courier, what logistics company, what Royal Mail offer. They'll have that offered elsewhere, and they'll choose people who say, well, actually, we are in favour of a green agenda and we don't use flights to transport our mail across the UK. But the point I want to make is that that's a decision the company made to take those flights off their schedules. In doing that, that means they're going to start moving mail back around using rail and road. And that means that to configure the network to connect from the extremes of the UK and deliver a next day service, that can't be done without pushing times back. The deal Royal Mail wanted was 3 hours. We wouldn't accept that because we knew that 3 hours would have destroyed the universal service, which is also what Royal Mail wanted. Can I also say one of the big things that's been at the heart of the row that's been going on for a number of years is the reality that what Royal Mail really wanted is to take parcels that is the only bit of the company that's growing, use the Royal Mail brand, but put it in an entirely different company. We've been fighting that battle for years. And the basis of our thinking is this: we have to have that work done by the core business. Otherwise, Royal Mail does not exist. And
why? Because, I mean, on the face of it...
Well, because letters are declining, and letters, they'll just leave it to wither on the vine. And all of the jobs were in that part of the business. So what they wanted to do was go out and bring not just new terms and conditions, but an entirely new workforce.
So what I was reading over the weekend about various depots people being ordered to prioritise parcels over Christmas cards, for example, or even hospital appointment letters, that's bang on, is it?
Well, what we're seeing is that our members see that every day of the week, so they're making it clear that they're being ordered to do that or instructed to do that. I think the customers know because of the way that they're either not getting deliveries or the way that they are receiving mail in batches that has clearly been left in the office for some time. So it's happening. What Royal Mail seem to be saying about it, we don't understand. And, what they need to recognise is that postal workers go out and talk to their customers. And obviously, they're telling them the truth is that mail is being left in favour of parcels. Now, the company...
And I mean, I corroborate that in that I know... I mean, I live sort of slightly off the beaten track, and I know that I'm getting batches of letters rather than necessarily daily deliveries.
And what Royal Mail would be better off doing is being truthful about that when they come under pressure, and saying to the workers... telling them the truth that they can see. And of course, the more that happens, the more trust is not rebuilt. So, we've got to deal with those situations, Ian. But, I'll come back to your central point that you started about the agreement. Look, in disputes, you tell me any dispute at the moment that's gone on in the last year and a half where there isn't a similar view. I've heard it. I've heard it on your show. I've heard it on other shows. And, people go from this point of view of saying, and I get that, you go out on strike, you build the members up for that strike, you have to work hard to get the members in that position, and they backed us, no doubt about that. But when there's a deal, that's often, in our industry,
but in the end,
what I would always say, let me make this point, no one will ever find me saying that dispute was about keeping Royal Mail the same. We were very clear to our members that the company had to change. It was always about how do you do the change. So I am going to say to you that for a lot of our members, maybe particularly an older group of members who've been around a long time, the change was never going to be acceptable. That's not the fault of the union. That's the reality of our, communications is changing across the world and is going to continue.
Now, this wasn't just about pay. This was about conditions.
Yeah.
But can you really convince your members when, as one of the emailers said there, he lost 18 days' pay by going on strike action? Was the deal that you secured at the end of it worth him losing 18 days' pay?
I think that when you start out on a dispute, you can't predict. What you're trying to do is reach a settlement. What happened in our dispute, the truth, is that the company became obsessed with destroying the union rather than reaching an agreement. We didn't want to take 18 days action. They were doing things in the workplace during the dispute. I described it many times on the media as the most brutal attack on workers. They were doing things to get into the sort of psychology of workers to destroy their sort of feelings. They wanted people to
We
leave.
saw this on social media, didn't
out.
we? It was Simon Thompson, the then chief executive.
It was outrageous.
Insulting his own workforce individually on social media.
Yeah, and look, if what I'm saying is not true, why do you think that a year or so on from that dispute, all of the leaders of the business at that time who prosecuted those policies, who came up with a business plan that was never going to work, who gave away £650 million to shareholders when the company was starting to lose money, why do you think they've all gone? Why have they all left the business? I mean, you won't find many other companies, unless there's a full takeover, where the whole of the senior leadership team that were in place then. Now, what's happened is, of course, there's been a huge amount of damage done during that period. What we're trying to do now is pick up the pieces and rebuild Royal Mail.
I can remember the last time you were in here, I think we talked about, well, why isn't the Royal Mail board taking action against the senior leadership team? Because they can see, as clear as night follows day, what they're doing. And
well, some of them must have been complicit.
Well, some of them must have been, but in the end, the majority presumably prevailed, and that's why these people are no longer there. Right, we're going to take your calls in a moment. If you'd like to ask Dave a question, 0345 6060 973. Don't really want to make this out entirely about the dispute that's been ongoing. But obviously that's going to take up some time, but maybe a few questions about the postal service in general and how, indeed, it can compete with other private sector companies like Every. It is 21 minutes past 8.
LBC. Iain Dale. Text 84850. This is LBC.
8:24 on LBC. We have Dave Ward, the General Secretary of the Communication Workers Union, with us. Let's go to Pat in Warwick, first of all. Hello, Pat.
Oh, hi there. How you doing?
Good, thank you. What would you like to say?
I'm basically just wondering when the union's going to grow some teeth.
Okay.
I'm a new starter. I'm on the new 30 hours contract. I'm a postie, obviously. And everything that was promised me when I took the job up is BS. I was offered lots of overtime. There's no paid overtime. Loads of other perks and everything else, and nothing is happening. I was told that I would qualify for the escrow payment, in lieu of the pay rise that came through as part of the agreement. And I didn't get it. And yeah, I'm just wondering when the CWU is actually going to grow some teeth and start biting back.
Well, I'm glad you said grow some teeth. Dave?
Yeah, I don't think I'll need to grow any. I think I've got a full mouthful there. Pat, are you a member of the union?
Yes.
Okay, well, that's good. And let me answer your point about the escrow payment or the lump sum payment. There was a £1,500 or £500 plus a £1,000 payment. That was linked to timelines of when people did join. There was cut-off dates. There always was going to be. So, I don't know when you started. So obviously you didn't start in the period when you would have qualified. On your points about what you were promised, I mean, I'm assuming you mean by the company and what they said to you in employing you. And the key point I think you're making is that you're one of the new entrants that's coming on lower terms and conditions. And, let's be absolutely clear here. Royal Mail imposed the terms and conditions, new terms and conditions, during the dispute. They were, as the dispute, before it was resolved, they carried on. Every time somebody left, they recruited people on new terms and conditions. And that was not an issue at that point that we could sustain the dispute on once we'd settled on all of the other points in it. What we did get them to agree was that they would look at an alternative approach. And one of the first items on our agenda as we moved the company on, because we have got to try and get quality of service right, and that means that they need to recruit people on the same terms and conditions because they're never going to get enough staff without doing that. We will be making that one of our priority issues as we go forward. That's what the agreement said. So we have the opportunity to sit down with a company. What I think the company is saying, I think they recognise that it's been not very good approach. They can't keep people. What I heard one of the senior people saying was they did understand that, but they wanted to see more evidence of it. Well, we're supplying them with the evidence, and we're confident that as time moves on, particularly as you're a union member, the more people that get behind that argument, we will reverse those terms and conditions and get you onto the same level. Can I
just quickly interrupt? Sorry.
Yeah.
I work on a rural round in Warwickshire.
Yeah.
The revisions that are coming through after Christmas, at the moment, it's insane. After Christmas, we're looking at picking up a whole new development of houses on the same round. That's like another 200 houses, another 200 addresses. And we're still expected to deliver in the same time frame. And from my depot to where we deliver is a 20 minute to half an hour drive. And then obviously 20 minute to half an hour drive back. Just the time frames.
But I mean that's okay. No, we get that, Pat. Dave. I mean that's surely where the trade union comes into play, isn't it?
Exactly. So, Pat, those revisions were again things that during the course of the dispute, the company imposed unachievable workloads for our members, and that is why quality of service is failing. We didn't agree any of those revisions. They imposed them. People left. And they tried to put more and more work on other workers. So what we're saying to the company, if they're telling you there's another round of revisions after Christmas, believe me, we are saying to the company at the moment, it would be, using your word, insane for them to go back out, make more cuts, and at the same time destroy quality of service even more. So our position is that shouldn't be happening. Watch what develops over the coming weeks. We're having conversations where I do think for the first time there is a different attitude from some of the leaders of the company, particularly new ones, who are beginning to see this firsthand.
So you now have...
they are in a similar place to us, that you've got to be able to deliver the work.
So you now have a constructive working relationship with the management in a way that you certainly didn't the last time we spoke.
I would say to you it's early days, and that is not being felt at the moment at local level. There's no two ways about that, because
so
the
that
culture,
would always take time, wouldn't it, to filter
It will
down?
take time, but this is where I believe there's room for some optimism, because the conversations, I can only be honest about the conversations that I've had and that the union is having now. We've just got a newly elected Deputy General Secretary who's got some very good ideas on how you solve problems as well, and we're putting forward our proposals on how you deal with these situations. But at the root of that, I think the company are beginning to see that what Simon Thompson and his team continue to do, the legacy of Simon Thompson was that he brought in 3 or 4 of his mates, I think, and they carried on after the agreement, still asking people to do the impossible. They didn't really honour the agreement, so we've been in a constant row with them. I think that's about to change, and it needs to change for this reason. The only way Royal Mail is going to be successful is if they get the workforce back on board, which means giving them realistic workload. It means recruiting people to cover those who have left, and it means equalising the terms and conditions of workers, and it means us all moving forward together. We're up for that. Let's hope that the company will see sense, and in particular, Pat, on some of the revisions that you're talking about that may be due after Christmas.
OK, Pat, thank you very much. We'll come to more of your calls in a moment. It's 8:32 News Headlines on LBC with Darryl Jackson.
A British boy who's now 17 but who went missing while on holiday in Spain 6 years ago has been found in France. He was away with his mother and grandfather at the time. Norfolk police say they cannot explain the behaviour of a missing woman last seen on CCTV almost a week ago. Detectives believe 55-year-old Gaynor Lord may have entered the River Wensum after finding her belongings in a nearby park. And EU leaders have unexpectedly agreed to open membership talks with Ukraine. Hungary's Prime Minister has called it a bad decision. LBC weather, scattered showers continuing in the northwest tonight, largely dry elsewhere and a low of 1 degree.
LBC. Iain Dale on LBC. Text 84850.
8:35 is the time on LBC. Dave Ward is here, General Secretary of the Communication Workers Union. Janet is in Chelmsford. Hello, Janet.
Hi.
Hello. What would you like to say?
I'm a retired post person, and what I'd like to ask Dave is, because the Royal Mail has a obligation for the universal service to operate 6 days a week, my concern is Is Royal Mail going to lose that? And are we still going to keep that service, or are we going to lose it altogether?
Okay. Well, Janet, it's a very good question. And it's been one of the issues, again, that's been at the heart of the dispute. And in truth, it's at the heart of whether Royal Mail has an opportunity to grow in the future. And we don't always see eye to eye with the company on this. So the universal service is what we have to deliver. Royal Mail has to deliver by legislation. It's the service where we deliver 6 days a week, one price goes anywhere service. Letters are declining. And what I'm going to say to you is an honest assessment of the situation is that it's really important that Royal Mail retains a universal service. Whether or not it's possible on the economics of it to retain it in its current format is a debate that we really do need to sit down with the company and come up with the right solution. We're very aware that across Europe and across the world, universal services that are applied by other postal administrations have been reduced. And the argument goes something like this: letters are declining, it's not economically viable, the company needs to move on to parcels. What we say is that we need to expand the role of postal workers. And there are different ideas. They were part of the agreement. We're having those conversations. Postal workers doing different things. Some of those things in communities, some of those things, different commercial products that could be offered. And it would be madness to completely get rid of the universal service, because as much as I'm not a fan of people like Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos, can you imagine what they would do if they were running a company and they had that infrastructure in place? They wouldn't be talking about dismantling it. They would be talking about how they could use it to grow the business. And that is where there has to be a balance here. We have to make it economically sustainable, and that means growing different products and services through the universal service.
And getting rid of stupid rules, which I'm going to give you an example. I have a little online bookshop business, which is fairly small. But if I have a package that's over 2 kilograms, I can't send it through Royal Mail through my local post office. I have to then go to a big post office in the town centre, which I don't go to the town centre very often. So what do I do then? I send it through Every.
Yeah, and hopefully, Ian, we can convince you with a service that Royal Mail can offer if it gets its staffing right.
But they have to get rid of stupid regulations like that, don't they?
We can pick them up for you, where you haven't got to go there at all, and we'll pick them up at the door. These are the sort of innovations that Royal Mail could be focusing on. But the truth is, the previous regime, and I will stress the previous regime, took that decision that they had to satisfy the shareholders. We didn't ask them to give away £650 million. We didn't ask them to start thinking about some of the things that were going to destroy the business. They chose to go down that path for their reasons. I think I could go into a lot more detail on that. I've already been told, to watch what you say, because you're damaging the reputation of certain people. But we're past that point. Those people done huge damage to this company, and it deserves to be in the hands of people who want to grow the business. If we all focus on that, there's enough, I think, affection for postal workers across the UK who do have an element of trust on the doorstep, which is not being used in a business sense.
Yeah.
And the company, right. I want to make this point, the company turned on its own workforce, and that was the biggest mistake that they ever made.
Right, let's Janet, thank you for that. Let's go to Kate, who's a new caller in Sheffield. Kate, hi.
Oh, hello.
What would you like to say?
Oh, hi, Dave. Okay, first of all, I'm not a postal worker, and I'm also not a member of the union. I'm a member of the public living in Sheffield, and my area worked out 6 months ago that our streets had been dissolved, and we haven't had anything like a regular delivery since then. And very slowly, I think a lot of people around here are recognising what's actually gone on and what's gone wrong with Royal Mail over the past couple of years, and are aware that it is not the fault of the posties. the posties are obviously amongst us, their friends and neighbours, and they're telling us what their working life has become like. Heartbreaking to see the state of distress, to be honest with you, that many of them are in. And I, for one, feel that I can't stand by and do nothing. So my question really, I've got two questions. The first one is, what can the union suggest that we, the general public, might be able to do to help our posties?
I think that is that you've got to get on to the management. You've got to tell them that you're seeing what you're seeing on the streets, and you're seeing, how this has affected a lot of the local posties, and you want the company to start supporting them more. That will chime with the message that we're putting across. I'd also like to say to you, Kate, that, not just you, but we'd love the public to help us think about how we can grow Royal Mail's business, because there is a truth to the fact that letters are in decline. But I think what you're saying is what I see all the time, which is, although people might not always appreciate what a postal worker brings now in terms of letters, because their lives have moved on in some cases to other things, there's still about 7 million people in the UK that use letters. What other things? Because I think people do like to see postal workers coming down the street. Now,
they do.
I think it gives a sense of security in the community, and we're out there trying to say that actually it is such an important service that goes to, never was that shown more than during the pandemic, where we picked up the test kits, we delivered the test kits. Our members were often the only point of contact for some people living in rural areas. That is worth something. And what we're saying is, help us, Kate, get that message across to the employer, and also help us grow the business.
As I said, I, for one, feel that I can't do nothing. And what I have done is, it's kind of evolved. A few neighbours have got together, and we have a community group called Save Our Posties now here in South Sheffield. We are we're turning up at our local delivery office once a week with banners of support for the workers. And I know this sounds very twee, but we're taking flapjacks and brownies to them, and we are very appreciated, including by the management of the depot too, I have to say. We've raised the profile by
don't get them in trouble, Kate.
Well, we've raised
there are some good managers.
There are some, and this is where your suggestion of getting in touch with the management. Who do you mean? Who do you want us to,
I think the ones I would have told you to get in touch with have all gone. But I think it would still be worth contacting the new CEO, who, as I'm saying, speak as I find, seems to have seen through some of the problems and wants to work with the union. We want to work with him and his new team to try and put things right. So the CEO of the company is probably the one
I think
contact.
She means more locally.
Well, that would be like the regional manager. I don't know who that person is in your area, but yeah, there'll be a regional manager above the sort of local manager who you should contact.
Kate, thank you very much indeed. Let's move on to Kenny on the Wirral. Hello, Kenny.
Hello, Ian. Thank you. Hello, Dave. My point is, I'm old enough to remember when I had my regular postie, and this time of the year, I'd be giving them a card with a £5 or a £10 and Happy Christmas. Are we going to see that day where we're going to get our regular postman?
I think a lot of people still do. I do.
Well, no, I think Kenny's got a point. That was one of the attacks, Kenny, that they did on people to try and break their spirit during the dispute. Was they took people off of their regular walks, they got rid of walks, piled them onto other people, left people standing around. And of course, a lot of postal workers, not all of them, they do like to have the same delivery because they know the customers, they help the customers, they go above and beyond.
And you know where all
customers.
The houses are. You know that one that no one else can find.
They
you know where
that,
it is.
Well, exactly that. They know that the area. What I would say to you is that if we can get the company to recognise that the postal worker on the front line is their greatest asset, we may get back to those days where you have a regular postal worker, because there's no doubt about it. The agreement that we've reached does have a section in it where we're going to get the postal workers, a selection of them together, and we are going to try out to use their knowledge to drive different forms of business, and make sure that there's more transactions that take place on the doorstep that can, build the support that you get from your local postal worker. So, we want those days to return, and I think there are opportunities to do that.
OK, Kenny, thank you. We'll move on to more calls in just a few moments with Dave Ward, General Secretary of the Communication Workers Union. It's 8:46.
LBC. Iain Dale on LBC.
Dave Ward with us, General Secretary of the Communication Workers Union. Dave is in, not this Dave, the caller Dave is a new caller, another one in Sheffield. Hello, Dave.
Hello.
Hi, what would you like to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to know what Dave's opinion of fleet was and how he sees it going in the future. I mean, the agreement that I've heard him talk about this past hour, I don't know what he's talking about because I'm still waiting for my agreement to be agreed. I'm being tasked with working on an ageing fleet. Some of these trucks and cars are over 10 years old, and I just don't understand what the business's plan is with regards to that. So I just wanted to see if you had any information on that, please.
Yeah. Okay, so Dave, what Dave's talking about for your other listeners, fleet is like effectively our mechanics that repair all the vans. The truth in that debate is that what the company would like to do is outsource the whole lot of it. And had it not been for the union, that wouldn't have happened. Where we are, Dave, in terms of getting the agreement for fleet, because that wasn't accepted, is that our team are back in there negotiating, and I'd be pretty confident that fairly soon we'll get an agreement. What we want to do, though, is make sure that it's still you guys that are doing the work. I know the work becomes difficult. Obviously, Royal Mail are moving to electric vans as well, so that poses some new challenges for our mechanics who can skill themselves up. They're highly skilled people to do that work. So, we're hoping the talks are going on now. we're hoping that'll be resolved shortly after Christmas.
Well, that's good news for you, Dave. Let's move on to Daniel in Coventry. Hello, Daniel.
Hi there, how you doing?
Good. What would you like to say?
Just a query really to Dave about these revisions that they've implemented. I'm obviously a postie myself. These revisions they've implemented, they've taken haven't taken into account, anybody's disabilities or how it's affecting them in the workplace. They've just completely torn up the book on people that are struggling. These revisions, like previous calls, they've added 2-3 hours onto people's rounds, and it's continuing. Dave mentions that it's going to be sorted in the future, but we need now. We don't need, next year. Or this is people's livelihoods.
Yeah, Daniel, look, the revisions, I'm glad you said that had been imposed because the union didn't agree with those revisions, turning that situation around when the company was almost on the brink of bankruptcy, and that was real. We had independent people that we brought in to look at the books, so we knew that, and that would have meant that there was no jobs in Royal Mail if it had got to that point. I don't think there was going to be any government that would have bailed out Royal Mail. It's a private company now, so that wasn't something that we could risk. And clearly, those revisions aren't working. One of the central things, when I say sort it out, I mean, it requires the whole of the union, the members, to get behind that and to get back to a place where you've got sensible staffing in your office, and that's what we're working towards. But can I also say to you, one of the key problems that the company faces in delivery work and in incentivising and motivating our members to get back to a position where they've got achievable workloads is whether or not they think that people should be working every second of the day. And as you know, Daniel, the technology that they've got now, this is a real big problem, similar to what you see at Amazon. They've got technology that can follow a postal worker every second of the day, where they know where they are at any point in time. We understand that technology can be useful for customers, and we're not against that. But what it's done is create a set of working methods that people can't put up with. There's no freedom. There's no, if you stand still and talk to a customer, you're likely to be pulled up when you get back to the office saying why you were standing still.
That somebody is there sitting in front of a computer monitoring?
Yeah. Yeah.
Really?
I think there'll be postal workers that know that they will have been questioned as to why they wasn't moving at a certain time. So here's the key thing. If we want to get it back right, the first thing that has to happen is that we have to come up with a new way of doing those revisions. We have to come up with a way that gives postal workers a bit of incentive, and basically they have to be trusted to know what is a fair day's work for a fair day's pay. At the moment, the company are pushing them to limits that are not sustainable, and then of course people leave. So it kind of becomes a false economy for the company. And our view is that we've got to change the whole approach to those revisions, and that's the discussion that we're having, Daniel.
George says we've gone from a family-friendly company to, if you've got kids, maybe this isn't the job for you. How accurate is that?
Well, I think that refers to the point about people who would have started early and want to finish early because they balance that with their domestic situation, and we get all of that. But I am going to say this in a way that I don't think the union or any union is going to be able to change this in a company like Royal Mail. The markets that Royal Mail are going to go after, that they have to go after, is essentially next day parcels. And you've only got to look out your front door and see what time people are delivering next day parcels. And we're not against that. If our members want jobs, we got to try and improve the terms and conditions, as we always do. But we do have to meet the needs of the customer. And I'm not saying that from a point of view of a sort of management cliche. I'm saying that from the reality of how we're going to grow this business.
I get deliveries at 11 o'clock at night.
Well, I won't go that far in, but... What I am saying is there's ways of doing that, and we have had it in the past. You know, when I joined Royal Mail, there were shifts. You did a late shift, you did an early shift. There's different ways of doing it that people can still get a benefit from, and hopefully within that you can still have family-friendly duties.
Well, and I mean, there are lots of people in the workforce who don't have families, and presumably there are ways of rostering those people on sometimes and others. It's all a matter of negotiation.
The world's moving 7 days a week now, isn't it? It's moving 24/7. If we're not part of that, then there ain't no Royal Mail. And that is a change that, you know, we've got to kind of do in the right way. We believe we can, but we do need to get the company on board for treating its workers in a better way.
Right. Daniel, thank you very much for that. Let's go to Jimmy in Crediton. Hello, Jimmy.
Hello there, Ian. Hello, Dave. Parcel Force USR here. What is the future for Parcel Force within Royal Mail Group? Are we amalgamating with letters, or what's going on? Nobody seems to know.
Okay, so Parcel Force, again, for your listeners, is one of Royal Mail's brands. It's owned by the Royal Mail Group, the same as Royal Mail, but it does some slightly different parcels, often a lot of the bigger parcels. I think our view, Jimmy, as a union, has been for some time that for job security purposes, Parcel Force members would be better being part of the Royal Mail Group. And the agreement we reached, as you know, this was another thing that, you know, maybe not everybody sees this, but what Royal Mail wanted to do was to bring in self-employed workers right across the business. And we were able to stop them bringing in effectively the same workforce, self-employed workers that makes up most of the competitors' employment models. And, you know, we think that the best way forward for Parcel Force is to get into that place. We're also in a position where we're worried that effectively Royal Mail has a brand that it could end up competing against its own brand. And that don't seem to make sense. Now, we buy that because there is different types of parcels that only Parcel Force can deliver. Particularly the very large parcels and different sort of products that you don't sort of do in the core network. But I think the answer is to eventually amalgamate the networks. Our job, though, Jimmy, is to protect the Parcel Force drivers as part of that. And that's what we'll be looking to do as we move forward.
Because it would make sense. If you're competing with the likes of Every, they haven't got two parts. They've got the international part and domestic, I suppose. But you've got to be able to compete like with like.
Ian, you know, what I think Royal Mail keeps Parcel Force as an option for is because what they always wanted to do, which is to remove all the parcels from Royal Mail and put them in an outside company, which they can sell off very quickly again. And importantly for them, they could bring in an entirely self-employed workforce. And that's the sort of battles that we've been facing. We've won those battles. You know, our members may not always see that, but had we not won those battles, there wouldn't be jobs in Royal Mail now.
OK, Dave, thank you very much indeed. Lots of calls still here, but we are going to finish because I want to move on to a different subject in a few minutes' time. That's Dave Ward, General Secretary of the Communication Workers Union. Thanks for coming in for the last hour. Now, the actress Sienna Miller has described the judgment, in her word, over being pregnant at the age of 41 and having a 14-year age gap with her partner as double standards. She discussed comments about her being the older woman and expecting a baby with 27-year-old Ollie Green on a Vogue podcast. Do you think there are double standards here? Would anyone raise an eyelid if a 41-year-old man was having a baby with a 27-year-old woman? I don't think they would. Why are such double standards prevalent in our society regarding the so-called older woman? 0345 6060 973 is the number to call.
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 9 o'clock, a British boy who went missing in Spain 6 years ago is believed to have been found in France. Greater Manchester Police is in contact with French authorities after reports of a possible sighting of Alex Batty. He was 11 when he disappeared. Detectives think he'd been taken abroad by his mother to live an alternative lifestyle. Well,